Hello, fellow traders. Tis I, TheRumpledOne, coming to you Monday, April the 24th. The year's 2023. Let's talk trading. Progress requires unlearning with Walmal. These videos are for educational purposes only. Your results may differ from mine. Walmal, last night when I was doing the weekly open in Gap, I was telling traders that I came across the quote, progress requires unlearning. And I, kind of expounded on it, and gave them my 2 cents. So what's your 2 cents on that idea?
Well, it's kind of funny that you came across that because in the world of psychology, if you're into that type of stuff, and I know of at least one trader who listens to his videos is into that because he was a psychologist. But there's this idea in psychology, it's called the power of unlearning, and the reason why, I guess, is because what happens is that if you're just relying only on what you've learned so far, which is very powerful, don't get me wrong, what happens is you can go and get yourself stuck in a tunnel, and you become very, very myopic in the way that you look at the world, and you don't allow new things to come in and influence what you're able to do. So the idea in the psychology world is that what you need to do is sometimes you need to go and say, press that reset button, pull back a little bit, and I hate to use the term, but reimagine, what you're doing and how you're doing it. But, and there's some truth to that, I think, in trading too, because sometimes, I know you have a phrase that you say a lot, that you like to say a lot. And that's, I'm believing my own press releases. And sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it's not, And, especially if we're on this journey where, we're trying to, we're just at the cusp where we're starting to make some money, but we're not really truly there yet. We still see some room for some major improvements. And well, maybe it's time to step back and unlearn some things. And that doesn't mean, and here's the cautionary tale, that does not mean that you start hopping from method to method. You start hopping around from money management system to money management system. Now, that's not what the unlearning that at least I'm talking about is. More of it is that we all have some habits and some things that we do out of comfort. We call it emotional, our emotions and such, and what happens is we do things as creatures because they feel comfortable. Well, I think some of those things have to be unlearned. We need to go and say, you know what, trading is risky. And if it's risky, there's going to be some uncomfort at times. And I don't mean uncomfort in the situation that you go and, put your account at risk, but uncomfort in the sense that, hey, I need to go and take the risk. What does that mean? That means that if I see the trade, I take the trade. If I see my out, I take my out. And take on the uncomfortableness maybe of, hey, I got out too early, but I got out too early because it felt comfortable to get out. I saw you like to say a lot, I saw the $50 on the table and I took it and put it in my pocket. Well, that's great, but does your method call for that? Or is it just you're doing it just because that's what you're in the habit of doing? You're comfortable doing it, from the other side of the coin is that, okay, I'm down and I'm staying in here because I can't afford to go and lose this trade, and I'm going to stay in, and I'm holding on. And meanwhile, your method says, no, it's time for you to get out. It just didn't work. Take the loss, move on, look for the next opportunity where you'll make it up, or at least make up part of it. And that's what you got to do. We have to unlearn those habits, unlearn those types of thinkings.
Are you talking to me, Walmal?
No, I'm talking to myself.
Well, no, it's kind of interesting because when you said that thing about grabbing the 50 and oh I should have stayed in, I mean, I must say that how many times a day? But it's funny because
More than we can count.
yeah, well, one of the things that I heard was you said your method. Now, part of the I guess it's you almost have to define method because there's two parts to it. There's the what's happening on the chart, and then there's what's happening with your account. So it's like, is the money going to be the overriding factor, or is what's happening on the chart going to be the overriding factor? That's, I think, and that's where I think some of the confusion may or may not come in.
Yeah, I think what it really comes down to, for me anyway, the money is always the overriding factor, like in terms of risk management, and preventing loss. And what I mean by that is that I got my number one thing more than anything else, and it's part of my method. I make it part of my method, and that is that I need to preserve capital at all costs. Period. That is rule number one. It's my last rule. It is the overriding factor on everything I do. And by doing that, the worst thing that's going to happen is that tomorrow I get to come back and play again. As long as I go and follow that very simple rule. So that's got to be, the number one rule that has to be placed. So that is, I integrate that into my method. Now, when you're saying method, I know what you're alluding to. In other words, I'm looking at the chart. I see a trade opportunity. And the trade opportunity says I should go in, but for whatever reason, it's going south. It's not working very well. Well, my overarching rule is this, I have to make a decision. Is this trade that's going bad on me right now? Now it may turn around and go good on me, but right now it's going bad on me. Is this affecting that preserved capital, idea? And if it is, well, too bad, I'm gone. Now, so then it gets into this argument again of, well, yeah, you just went and said, Walmal, in the very beginning of this video, you got to be willing to take risk. You're right. I'm willing to take risk, but I put parameters around my risk. I'm willing to go and lose X dollars. I'm willing to lose X pips. However you as a trader want to go and define it, and the story, and then that way by doing that, okay, that's my risk. It's sort of like you go into the casino and you lay your chips down. That's what you're risking. You're not risking any more or any less than what you laid your chips down on the table, and that's what I'm going to risk. And I'm willing to go and do that. And that's how you preserve capital.
Right.
So hopefully that makes some sense, to to some people out there.
Yeah.
And again, it comes down to what are we doing? I think a lot of us, myself included. So I want people to understand when I say these things, and sometimes it may sound harsh. Well, I'm talking to myself probably more than I'm talking to anybody else out there. but the reality is that I got to go and there are habits that you can get into. There are days where it just seems like no matter what you do, everything seems to just come up roses, and you probably take more risks on those days because everything's turning up right. Well, the problem is day two comes along and maybe it doesn't work out nearly as pleasant, and you've picked up some bad habits from the day before, and then you say, well, why did it work on day one? Well, it worked on day one because for whatever reason the market is moving in a particular direction and matches up with your methodology, your way that you trade better than other days. And that's the thing, I don't care what method you use, because the reality is no matter what method you use, it's going to work better on some days than others.
Yeah.
And if you match up pretty good, if you match up right, you can actually do pretty well.
Yeah, one of the things I mentioned last night to traders, and maybe you can weigh in on this, was the whole idea that progress requires unlearning points the finger at you, the individual. Whereas, and you had mentioned earlier about, it doesn't mean switching methods.
Right. Yeah, and yeah, and the problem is usually not the method. The problem is the method user. you know,
Yeah,
we don't execute well. We're human and we don't execute well. We get into trades late. We dilly dally. We are afraid to go and take the trade when we should have taken the trade. We get distracted and we don't take the trade. And by the way, that goes back the other way. And when we're already in a trade, we dilly dally about getting out of trades. We see our exit, we don't take our exit. We allow things when things don't work out. We let things run against us. And next thing you know, you're in pretty bad shape because you let things run against you. Or you sit and I've heard so many traders say it, myself included, is like, well, it went against me X dollars, and I know it's going to come back. And more times than not, you're probably right. But what if it doesn't? And so you stay in the trade, and the next thing you've blown an account. I blew an account that way one time. And I think that most traders can say the same thing, that they've blown an account that very way. And we just got to be honest with ourselves and say, hey, this is not a game of pride. This is a game of making money. And I don't mind losing money. Well, I do, obviously, but
you hate losing.
I do hate losing. But at the same time, you have to be willing to say, "Hey, it's just part of the game." You know, beat yourself up for a few minutes, and then move on and say, "Okay, that's part of the game. You got me. Let's go. Let's go. I'll get you next time."
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's really my 2 cents on the power of unlearning. It's and like you said, it's interesting how so many of these things that in the trading world go and line up perfectly with what psychologists tell us what we need to do for personal progress.
Yeah.
And and maybe there's something to that.
Yeah. Walmal, do you know how to sail, as in sailboat?
Yes, I do to a certain extent. Yeah, I used to do it a lot.
Well, the reason I ask is, see, I don't know anything about sailing, but somehow the other day it kind of hit me that trading might be um, something that the sailing analogy is more appropriate than sports analogies. And the reason being is in sailing, you basically have to read the wind and the water, and then you adjust accordingly. And I'm kind of thinking that that's the same in trading.
Yeah, absolutely. And because there's in sailing or even in motorboating to a certain extent, you've got an underlying current that's sitting there that's going to drift you in a particular direction. And it's funny, like when you're in a sailboat or even a motorboat, you can have your your boat pointed at a particular place you want to go to, and meanwhile you're drifting to the right by 10 degrees or 15 degrees, and it's called crab walking. So if you want to get to point A, sometimes you have to go and point your boat to 10 degrees or 15 degrees to one side or the other of that.
Yeah.
Well, I think we as traders, sometimes we are looking at the market and we're just seeing it, and we have to go and look and say, hey, wait a second, the method says this, but what I'm actually seeing happening is it's just not working. And maybe that's part of, okay, let's go and sit this out for a little bit, or the other possibility is, hey, this is a great opportunity.
Yeah, well, we'll get back to sailing, but fellow traders, just remember, it's you, and it's not what you trade, it's how you trade it. So go out there and drain the banks. This is the Rumpled One, over and out.